Wow, this is hard because I just don't like being critical. It's not like I've been dabbling at this. I've been doing this for 2 decades, and there's some things that just aren't being said about engagement surveys. I mean, we're just a little too polite. So I've just got some real concerns with the role that engagement surveys play in a lot of companies right now. And I'll bet that you do too, deep down somewhere, or if it felt like it was safe to admit it, that you would say, something's just not quite right here. In this video, I want to put it all on the table. And by the time we're done, you'll see exactly why engagement surveys, in most cases, have failed us and what you can do instead. So write down today's date because this is going to be another leap forward in your professional journey. All right, here are my top 3 concerns. Number 1, engagement surveys are observational, not operational. In other words, they raise some really intriguing questions about things, but they don't really correspond to the specific things that you can do operationally that will remediate and close the loops on some of those gaps that exist in the organization. Other tools do that. I mean, for example, if somebody does an audit, they come back with specific findings like, hey, there's $1.5 million missing from the ledger, or our spending on office supplies is up 12% over last year. I mean, very tangible things. And frankly, the boardroom really likes specific, tangible. But when it comes to culture, we end up sort of talking about it in these nebulous terms. You know, we have some findings about culture, but they're very different from the kind of findings that we get when we do other things. I mean, if you think about it from the board's point of view, boards and C-suites deal in tangibles. And if we're not having a tangible conversation about culture, if we're just asking things like, hey, do you guys feel good about this? Do you like this? Do you like that? Those aren't things that really are in the same conversation as conversations about the bottom line. Now, here's the reason that I'm concerned about that is because it's been something like 30 years, and now we have some exceptional scientific, quantifiable data that links connections between some of these cultural things and the performance metrics that they result in. And we can look at specific categories and look at how a 3% change in this particular category leads to a change of X in the output of the organization. It's actually quantifiable, but we're using tools that still talk about it in a way that's archaic and old. Now, I have some theories about why we think of it that way. And there's an organization that we've all heard about who back in the 80s developed a 12-question survey on employee engagement. And I think that, listen, first of all, fantastic work. It was so important. But kind of what happened was they got this foothold. I mean, nothing wrong with them doing this, but they got this foothold. They're the ubiquitous source for this topic of engagement, of employee engagement. And they should be. But because everybody sort of had this monolithic pillar view of them, there weren't a lot of competitors to come along and challenge the thinking. And so the thinking, again, I hate being offensive to anybody because it really is important work, okay? But has the work advanced in 35 years? It really hasn't. The same 12 questions come up. One of those questions is, do you have a best friend at work? And again, that's a real sort of correlative question. It indicates, how someone's going to enjoy being at work, and it's true and everything. But in terms of what the board can do about that, other than creating a buddy system or assigning people or coming up with an app that you swipe right with your coworkers to become best friends, it's not a lot actionable. And it belies the actual scientific instruments that we now have that we should be using instead of a 40-year-old engagement survey or morale study. And I got to say this, it doesn't help at all that year after year, think about this, for 35 years ago, we said, hey, we're going to start measuring employee engagement. And because, our first study said that only about less than a third of the workforce is engaged, that means 2/3 is underperforming. And so we're going to start studying this. Well, the implication should be that we're going to fix it and improve it. So it doesn't help me believe in this at all when the same exact numbers come out in year 2 and 3 and 4, all the way up to year 35. The numbers haven't changed at all. I mean, it's just proof positive that the whole idea of measuring engagement has nothing to do with how you improve performance. So that's the problem with being observational instead of operational. And it's not that we can't be operational. It's just that we inherited a system that was observational in nature, and we haven't really touched it in almost 40 years. I hope that wasn't too offensive. All right. My number 2 concern with employee engagement surveys is anonymity. And here's what I mean by that. The temptation to lie is greatest when people perceive that telling the truth will cost them personally. And 99% of the time when people fill out an internal customer survey or just really an employee survey, they're not going to tell you the truth as much as they're going to say exactly what they think the boss wants to hear, because he actually might be hearing it. This is even more pronounced at companies that work on culture and talk about culture. Companies like that are typically big on positivity, having a positive attitude and being yes and things like that. And so it discourages a lot of positive feedback because the last thing anybody wants to be perceived as is someone who's kind of a squeaky wheel or a complainer or who has any kind of feedback that, suggests something isn't great. And so the companies that are often the worst at transparency and authenticity are the ones that are working on culture, which is unfortunate. Now, this doesn't have to be this way either. There's a way to elicit feedback with total anonymity. When I look at the way engagement surveys are conducted, there's just sort of a rudimentary nod to anonymity. There's not a full use of the tools and the psychology around anonymity. I'm telling you, when you effectively provide anonymity, the people know it, and the answers that you get, the feedback that you get is the most invaluable, authentic, actionable. I mean, people will tell you exactly what they need to see that's different in order for engagement to go up, in order for the employee value proposition. I mean, in most cases, the employee value proposition is pretty good, but the things that aren't good about it are kind of like a rock in your shoe. It's just that one little thing. And, if people aren't comfortable talking about it, it's kind of like you never get to just stop and remove your shoe real quick, shake the rock out, and keep going. But when you have that anonymity, and people do tell you exactly what's going on, and it's often very tangible, it's very operational, and you can make minor adjustments, and productivity and performance get significantly better. Concern number 3 is engagement surveys not working because they only capture surface level feelings or sentiment and not motivational needs. Remember, culture drives behavior. Behavior drives results. But what drives culture is human need. And your engagement survey is where you measure how well the employee value proposition speaks to the human needs of the people who work there. So what should we do about this? Well, obviously the whole reason this channel exists is to promote the idea that human behavior and performance has now scientific ideas that we're just under leveraging. And so there are a lot of things that can be done to, first of all, measure and monitor the level of need in an organization, and specifically to categorize the different needs that exist, to tweak the operational environment so that the employee value proposition delivers as much as it can to answer the needs of the people that work there. Because when employees' needs are met, they will thrive. And when they are not met, they will struggle and performance will struggle. So if you drive a car, there's a certain gauge on the dashboard of your car that you just automatically respect, and that's the fuel gauge. And the reason you respect that is because you know the utter consequences that await you if you just disregard the fuel gauge. You know that if you run out of gas, it's not negotiable. The car is going to, end up on the side of the road. The consequences of that are a lot worse than the inconvenience of having to pull over for 3.5 minutes and refill the fuel tank. Deprive your car of fuel, and it will stop working. Now, we talk a lot on this channel about the motivational response index. So think about the gauges on that dashboard as similar to the fuel tank, because those are measuring the different important factors that must be satisfied in order for people to come to work ready to go. It's just a better system than the conventional employee engagement survey that we've inherited. So if you're leading people, or maybe if you're in charge of doing some of these HR functions, don't fall into the survey trap. Don't just measure the way people feel and what sentiment tells you. Start measuring needs. Now, put together a free guide that breaks down all 15 of these categories that determine motivational response and how you can meet the needs of your people and produce a better outcome. So grab the link to that in the description and leave a note in the comments. Tell us about your experiences with employee surveys. Have you ever taken one? Have you administered one? And did you feel like the results were authentic? Were they anonymous? Did they measure specific actionable things, or were they more observational? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.